Welcome everybody. We're starting about 15 minutes late. So just like a British rail train, if it wasn't on strike, then I hope that we will catch up through the day. You're all very welcome here. My name is David Albert Jones. I'm the director of the Anscombe Centre, and this is a joint an event to do with a joint project between Oscott and the Anscombe Centre. As I will explain. So that's the good lady, Elizabeth Anscombe, great Catholic philosopher, and you can see a cigar and a drink, and if you'll just about make out a monocle, which gives you some idea of the lady she was. And this is Thomas Lineker. Before we were the Anscombe Centre, we were the Lineker Centre for Healthcare Ethics. So we changed our name, but we were originally named after Thomas Lineker, who was the founder of the Royal College of Physicians of London. He was physician to Henry VIII, and also he translated Hippocrates into Latin. So he had an interest both in medicine and also in ethics, and he also became a cleric. I think he was ordained in Rome. And he died just before the Reformation, so he didn't have to make any difficult decisions. So he's often cited as an example of someone who was a physician and a cleric and interested in ethics, and interested in the standards of medical ethics education. So that was our first patron. So the project that this is part of is called Science for Seminarians, and it's a project which is funded by an organisation called Equipping Christian Leaders in an Age of Science, a class. So the project here at Oscott has had three strands. The first is our bioethics course. So we teach a module, I think OC 6.7, 6th year in bioethics, and we've been teaching it for several years. But the funding allowed us to bring in scientists and clinicians for people to listen to. So we had Professor Neil Scolding, who works on adult stem cells in relation to multiple sclerosis. Who's a sort of world leader in the field. We had Callum Miller, who's a young doctor who's written quite a bit about abortion and maternal mortality, and has experience also of medicine in Africa, and particularly the debates over abortion and medicine in Africa, who gave the talk by Zoom from Austria, interestingly. And then we had Gavin Jarvis, who you will hear later, but who is Associate Professor of Pharmacology in Sunderland, and was talking about contraception and the contraceptive pill. We had Julie Maxwell, who's a paediatrician, talking about the evidence or lack of evidence for treatment of gender dysphoria in minors, and some of the controversy that we've heard about in relation to Tavistock. She was one of the first people to write expressing some concerns about the nature of the not simply just the treatment was given, but also the way in which questions were asked or not asked in terms of how people were moved through the system. We had Dominic Wilkinson, who is a neonatal paediatrician and is involved at a national level in terms of the guidance for decisions on withdrawal of treatment, and is also at the UE Hero Centre, which is a medical ethics centre in Oxford, which takes a different view from the Anscombe Bioethics Centre sometimes. Is more in general is more utilitarian. I think Dominic himself is not so much utilitarian, he's a bit more libertarian, but he also is somebody who's very interested in the difficulties of reaching a negotiated way forward where you have very strong emotions, but also you want to be informed by what are the costs and the effects of various things you might do or not do. So he was somebody who was good to bring before the students. And then we had Isabel Quiroga just this week, who is a transplant surgeon in Oxford, who is Spanish and knows the transplant system in Spain, and which is interestingly different in some ways from the English system, and also mentions on Thursday that she had been in Rome in 2000 for the meeting, international meeting of transplant surgeons, at which John Paul II gave an address talking specifically about the neurological criteria for death and whether that was acceptable or not in principle from a Catholic perspective. So someone who is there. So we had quite a sort of stellar lineup, I think. And also, as well as the bioethics module itself, I also parachuted in and did a talk for the first years on epistemology. And I talked about an article that I'd written on did the Pope ban blood transfusion in 1678, and how would we know? And this was based on the fact that I was looking on the internet, as you do, at the NHS site for transplant, and it had a little potted history of a history of blood transfusion, and it said right at the beginning, 1678, the Pope bans blood transfusion. And I thought, did he? And so then I started to look, how would I find out? Go to Wikipedia, citation needed, go to various books, and then go to the sort of articles behind the books and find out eventually that he didn't. But it is a much repeated story, and this is how often these things work. People quote other people who quote other people, and you have to search through the footnotes, and often you find a story which has been going for more than a century. Nobody's ever bothered to check up properly, and it's unfortunately still there on the NHS website. So today is those sort of strands that we've been having in relation to the course, but today we have a day lined up to talk about specifically about vaccines, about the COVID vaccine, as an instance of how we might think about science and scientific literacy and how it fits with our understanding of ethics and society. So safety, efficacy, and scientific literacy. That's me, and you can see that we're already late as the introduction. Then Gavin will be talking about how scientists know what's true or not. But I won't steal his thunder other than saying that. But I think speaking also from the perspective of somebody who's teaching medicine to students, so has a sense of this coming as an educator, not just as a scientist, educator of scientists, not just of the public. Then we have Dominic Kelly, who is an immunologist who works with the vaccine program in Oxford, which is was one of the sources of the COVID-19 vaccines. I'm not sure how directly he was involved with that particular vaccine, but his whole life has been spent working on vaccines in Oxford. Then we will have a break. I hope we'll keep to time for the break, if not anything else today. And then David Payton, who is a professor of economics in Nottingham, will get us to think about, well, how do we then take what these various things that we hear from scientists into the wider questions of sort of political and social policy, and what else do we need to think about? Or at least I think that's what he's going to say, but we'll have to wait until he says it. And then we've got something which I've called exercise stroke discussion. So we'll have discussion, but rather than just sort of Q&A, we also have some little exercises for you to think through, so we can have a bit of active participation as well as having a discussion.